the steps. We put it in descending order. We looked for a GCF. There wasn't one. And then we got to the counting terms step. So when you're counting terms, there are 3 terms. It's going to be in this order. It's going to look like this. And this is where the X method comes in. Anytime it's a trinomial, you're going to try to use what's called the X method, or what Coach Mack and I call the X method. The way it works is you make this X out beside the problem. Make a big X like that. Thus the name, X method. All right? In the top part of the X, you're going to put A times C. Whatever that number is. So if this was a 3 and this were a 9, you put 27 up there because you multiply. Okay? Multiply to get the number in the top. The number in the bottom part of the X right here is going to be B. Okay? So we want to find 2 numbers that fit into the sides. We'll call this M and N. Doesn't really matter. They're just numbers. We want M times N to equal A times C, and M plus N to equal B. That's what we need to happen. The 2 numbers that we get on the sides need to multiply to be the top, add to be the bottom. That's how we're going to factor trinomials. Okay? So we're looking for 2 numbers, M and N, that multiply to be the top, add to be the bottom. Multiply to be the top, add to be the bottom. Multiply to be the top, add to be the bottom. Say one more time. Multiply to be the top and add to be the bottom. Okay? That's got to be in your head the whole time you're doing this, okay? Now, let's look at an example and actually use that. So example A, 2x squared plus 7x plus 6. We're going to make our x. How do we get what goes in the top up here? A times C. A is 2, C is 6. 2 times 6 is 12. So we have a 12 up here. What goes in the bottom? 7. Whatever B is, whatever the middle piece is, goes in the bottom. Okay. Now, we need 2 numbers that multiply to be 12 and add to be 7. So you want to start thinking, what are the factors of 12? 1 and 12. What's 1 plus 12? 13, not 7. So that's out. 2 and 6 makes 7. Makes 8. 3 and 4 multiplies to be 12 and adds to be 7. So 3 and 4 are our numbers on the sides. Okay? No. This is just setting it up so that we can factor it. Now, what we want to do here is, Anna, I need you to put your phone away, like off your desk, not even near you. That goes for everybody. Okay. Now, so we're going to take these 2 numbers and we're going to replace the middle term with that. Okay. We're going to rewrite the problem as 2x squared plus 3x plus 4x plus 6. It does not matter what order you do that in. If you put the 4x in the front and the 3x in the second, it doesn't matter. You can do that in any order you want to, as long as it's still in descending order. These 2 have the same exponent, so it doesn't matter what order they go in. Okay? So we're going to, whatever numbers we get on the sides here of our x, we're going to replace the 7x in the middle. Because if I combine these back, 3x plus 4x is 7x. That's why we got to add to be the number in the middle, to B. So now, how many terms does this blue part have? 4. What method do we use when we have 4 terms? Grouping. So we're going to group this. First 2 together, last 2 together. What's the GCF of 2x squared and 3x? Just x, right? What's that leave in the parentheses? 2x plus 3. What's the GCF of 4x and 6? Kind of 2. Positive 2, so it's plus 2. What's that leave in the parentheses? 2x plus 3, because 2 times 2x is 4x. 2 times 3 is 6. Now, what's the factors at the end? X plus what? 2. The parentheses, the matching one, the first factor. The stuff in front is the second factor. Okay? X method for factoring a trinomial. That's the first example of that. That's what we're going to do. All right? Let's look at another one. Say we had x squared plus 3x plus 2. X squared plus 3x plus 2. Let's set the x up for that, because we look at it, we say it's in descending order. Yay, good, we don't have to do anything there. And then we look at it and say, okay, no GCF, x squared, 3x, and 2 don't have anything in common. So then count the terms, there's 3 of them, so that tells us to do the x method. What goes on the top of the x? X, what's in front of x squared? 1. 1 times 2, 2. On the bottom goes 3. Always the middle part in the bottom. To get the top number, it's always what's in front times what's in back. Okay? Always going to multiply. Now, so we need numbers that multiply to be the top and add to be the bottom. 2 times 1. That's the only things that multiply to be 2 is 2 times 1, right? 2 times 1 is 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. What do we do with the 2 and the 1? Yeah, going to go in the middle. X squared. Instead of plus 3x, we're going to put plus, I'm going to put plus 1x plus 2x. Again, it doesn't matter what order you put that in there. If you put plus 2x in the front, that's okay. Your factors are going to look a little bit different, but the final answer will be the same. Okay. The reason I put 2x last is because I had this plus 2 on the end. I know they can go together pretty easily. Right? Now what do? Group. I got 4 terms now. So I group the first 2 together and the last 2 together. What's the GCF of x squared and 1x? X. What's left in the parentheses? X plus 1. What's the GCF of positive 2x and positive 2? Kind of 2. Positive, so it's plus 2. What's left in the parentheses? X plus 1. Now, what's the final answer? X plus 2. There's the factored form of the original polynomial. Again, you can always check. When we're factoring, you can always check by remultiplying your answer. X times x is x squared. X times 2x. And x times 1 together, that's 3x. And then 1 times 2 is 2. You can always check by just multiplying it back out. Okay. 2x squared minus 7x plus 3. So this is where knowing your multiplication tables is a helpful thing because you can get the numbers faster. If you don't know your multiplication tables, work on them. Start learning them. At least to 12 times 12. 444. Is that got a GCF? First, is it in descending order? Yeah, I've got x squared, x, and plain number. So that's in descending order. Does it have a GCF across the whole problem? No. So what do we do next? Why? Trinomial's got 3 terms. What goes on the top? 2 times 3 is 6. What goes on the bottom? -7. That's a -7 in the middle, so it's a -7. So here we got a little sign change action happening here. We got +6 on top, so we got to multiply to be +6 and add to be a -7. Negative 6 times negative 1. Good job. These two, negative times negative turns it back to positive. 6 times 1 is 6. Negative plus negative stays negative. So that's where the negative 7 comes in. Now what do I do with that negative 6 and the negative 1? Put them in the middle. So we're replacing the minus 7x with 2x squared minus 6x minus 1x plus 3. Again, doesn't matter what order you put these two in there. You can go whichever order you want to. I don't care. It'll get the final answer the same. Now what? What's it called? Grouping. We'll group the first two together and the last two together. What do my first two have in common? 2 and an x. So 2x. What does that leave in parentheses? 1x minus 3. Because 2 times 3 is 6. Okay. Now, the second group, what do they have in common? A negative 1. Nothing else in common between a 1 and a 3 but 1. And because it's a minus sign right there, it's going to be a negative 1 we pull out. What does that change the inside of the parentheses to? X minus 3. Because negative 1 times x gives me negative 1x. Negative 1 times negative 3 gives me the positive 3. All right? What's our final answer for the factored form? 2x minus 1. All right? Not too bad. Sign differences can cause little issues. Let's look at this one. Say we had 4x squared plus 5 minus 9x. What do we do here? Got to get it in order first. Got to put in, rearrange it so it's 4x squared minus 9x plus 5. And then we look for a GCF, which there's not one. And we have 3 terms, so we know we're using, as Mike said, X method. What goes in the top of this X? 4 times 5 is 20. Always, once you get in descending order, it's always front times back. And get you the top. What goes in the bottom? Negative 9. So we need numbers that multiply to be 20 and add to be negative 9. Negative 4, negative 5. Doesn't matter what order we put that in there as. So I'm going to have 4x squared. It makes sense to me to put the 4x with the 4x squared. So I'm going to put minus 4x and then a minus 5x plus 5. Just makes sense to put them in there in that order. Although it still works if you don't. Group, first two together, what's their GCF? 4x, what's left in the parentheses? X minus how much? 1. So what times 4x gives me 4x would be 1. Second group. Negative 5. What's left in the parentheses? 1x minus 1. Final answer. X method for factoring a trinomial. All right, so there we've seen a couple where the negative sign was in the middle. You see how kind of that works. What if the negative sign was in a different spot? So like 2x squared plus 13x minus 7. It's already in descending order. There's no GCF. 3 terms, so we're doing X method. What goes on the top of there. Negative 14. 2 times negative 7. Negative 14. That goes on the top of the x. Goes in the bottom of the x. Is it negative? It's positive. It's got a plus sign in front of it, so it's a positive 13. So we need something that multiplies to be a negative 14 and adds to be a positive 13. 14 times negative 1 is negative 14. 14 plus negative 1 is 13. Now, what do I do with those? Put them in the middle. I'm going to have 2x squared. I'm going to put minus 1x plus 14x minus 7. My brain puts the 14 and the 7 together. I don't know. It doesn't matter, but that's just the way I like to do it. I think it does. That's. Mm-hmm. So what do we do next? Group first two together. What's the GCF? X. Nothing else. Just one x, right? What's left in the parentheses? What times x gives me 2x squared? 2x minus what times x gives me 1x? 1. Positive 14x and a negative 7. What do they got in common? Is it what we're going to do, plus 7 or minus 7? Why? Which sign are we going off of? Yeah, the one in front of the one with the x on it. We're always going to go by that sign. So it's a positive 7, and that leaves what in parentheses? X minus 1, right? Final answer. Notice here, our factors, these numbers here are not the same numbers that are there. Exactly. Okay? It doesn't happen on some of these problems. It does happen on some others, but not all of them. Eight x squared minus 8x minus 6. Is it in descending order? What next? No GCF, so we're going to do the X method. What goes on top? Negative 6, and on the bottom, negative 8. So I'm thinking factors of 6. Negative 2 and positive 3, but that adds to be 1. So that doesn't work. Maybe negative 6 and positive 1. What's that add to be? Negative 5. That doesn't work. What if I did the negative 3 and the positive 2? That doesn't work either. It doesn't give us negative 8. That's all the factors of 6. We've used them all, and none of them worked. If that happens, then that means that this guy won't factor. We call it prime. Prime means it will not factor. That's what prime means. When you say a polynomial is prime, it means it won't factor. All right. Easy enough. Three x squared plus 24x plus 45. Huh? 3 goes into itself. 3 goes into 24. 3 goes into 45. So we got a GCF of 3. So we're going to pull that out at the beginning. What's that leave in the parentheses? The x squared. How many times does 3 go into 24? How many times does 3 go into 45? Okay, so we have this trinomial left in the parentheses. We try to do X method with it. What goes on the top of that X? 15. Remember this 3 we've pulled out, it's stuck in this box. It's not doing anything but just riding along. Okay. What goes in the bottom? 8. Okay. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 plus 3 is 8. We have x squared plus do 3x plus 5x plus 15. Again, doesn't matter what order you do that. Now what? Group, first two together. What's the GCF of x and 3x? X squared and 3x. X. What's left in parentheses? X plus 3. GCF of the second one. What's left in parentheses? X plus 3. What's the final factoring for this problem? X plus 3. X plus 5. What else goes with that? The 3 that we took out at the beginning. It's got to be there. That's the factored form of that polynomial. If you don't have that GCF there from the beginning, you don't have the full answer. You've got part of it, you don't have all of it. So you got to have that GCF out there as well. Okay. So this one. Step it up a little higher. GCF of 5. Anything else? They all have an X. How many X's do they all have? 1 that they share. So we're going to have a GCF of 5X. What's that going to leave in the parentheses? I pulled one of them out. Should be x squared minus, no, how much? 13x. 65 divided by 5. Because you're pulling the GCF out. So you're basically dividing by that number that's in front. So that's where the 13x. What times 5 gives me 150? 30. Okay, so we factored it so far. So this one is definitely not what we would call prime because we were able to factor it in some way. If you can factor it in any way, it's not prime. Okay. So now we look at that trinomial that's left in the parentheses and we say, okay, can I do that with the X method? What goes on top? 30, negative 13 in the bottom. Yeah, 6 and negative 6 times negative 5 adds to be negative 11. So that doesn't work. Which one or both? Both. A negative 10 times a negative 3 gives me negative times negative is positive 30. Negative 10 plus negative 3 is negative 13. So that's the right two. Good job. So I got the x squared minus 10x minus 3x plus 30. Now what? Group the GCF of that group. Left in parentheses. Good. GCF of the second group. Negative 3, because remember we got to go with that sign right there. So it's a minus 3. And then it leaves in parentheses x. Remember that pulling that negative out is going to make that to a minus 10. And we need those to match. If those don't match, something went wrong. And then we take final factoring for this. 5x. And then what are my two factors from the purple part? There's our factoring with the x method. Doesn't change. You get to algebra 2 and we start factoring in there about day 3. Still the same x method if it's a quadratic that you're factoring. So it's not any different. Okay. So this is what we want to work on for our practice. On page 586, we're going to do 3 through 17. Do all of those. And on page 596, 4 through 21. We're going to do all of those. Okay. Don't just give me an answer, photo math people. Actually work it out. Show me how you got the x. Show me your grouping. Show me every single step. Not just an answer. I have a very strong feeling a lot of you are just throwing photo math on this thing. And that's fine to check your answers with, but it's not very good to learn with. All right.